So probably about 30 more seconds or so before we get started. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Again, if you're just joining us, you can feel free to use the QA function in Zoom to ask questions as we're going along. I promise by the end of this presentation, we'll take the time to read each question out loud. So you might see a question that's already asked, but we want to be able to compile all of these as well. So at the end of this, we'll get all these questions answered. If we don't have an answer for you today, we'll be sure to send this out with the links for where the webinar video is going to live. So starting with the presentation, this is the Tech Clean California Rules webinar. For this iteration of the program, this program just relaunched for the HVAC portion of it on April 25th, right? And so we are back, we are live. The program has funding and with more funding on the way. So getting into the agenda for this presentation, the first thing we're going to talk about is the program overview. Some of you that might have participated on this program previously, but some might not have participated, and this might be your first chance to participate on the program. So after that, we'll go into the heat pump incentives that are available, specifically for the single family HVAC portion, with the multifamily portion of the program starting up in about June. Then we'll go into the submittal process, how to submit your claims on this program. We'll go into some resources that are available for you as a participant in this program. We'll go into some contact information, and like I said, try to carve out a great deal of time for Q&A. So with the program overview for Tech Clean California, for those that don't know, Tech Clean California is a statewide initiative. It's a program to help promote the adoption of heat pump space heating and heat pump water heating. Last iteration of the program, we had over 1,000 participating contractors. With this round, looking to add quite a few more. With over $31 million in heat pumps incentives that were paid out in 2022, where those funds were utilized effectively and quite more of a success that they anticipated for this program to be, with over 13,000 heat pump projects that were funded. So it's quite remarkable how much this program is helping to transform the market and to usher in electrification and all its potential and possibilities. So going into the heat pump incentives that are available, which is an incredibly important part of this program. So available on this iteration of this program, this first lot of money that we currently have that we can count on is the single family HVAC portion of the program has $22 million available statewide. With the single family heat pump water heater program that's going to relaunch in around August or September, having about $80 million available to that, with the multifamily part of the program, like I mentioned, that's launching early June, having $7 million. So you'll notice that I'm going to go through a lot of these slides verbatim to help people that have are logged in on the phone, right? They didn't log in through the webinar, or people that have visual disabilities. I want to be able to get all this information out to everybody as much as we can. So all funding is allocated on a first come, first served basis and reserved upon receipt of incentive reservation. And we'll get into what that process looks like later on in the slides. But I wanted to point out that funding is not guaranteed unless a reservation is submitted while incentives remain. So one of the reporting websites that you see at the bottom of this slide, the techcleanca.com, the public data reporting portion of the website, is going to be updated quite frequently to give you an understanding of how much incentive is still available in the budget. Participants will be notified when budget drops below a certain threshold, and communications will increase in frequency as that budget gets closer to zero. So as we get to the lower part of the budget, we're going to update that website more frequently, and also time and date stamp when that was updated, so that you're confident when you're sitting at the dinner table with your customer explaining the potentials and incentives that are available for them. And like I said, in close to real time, where we're going to have that being updated on the website. So the next slide goes into the incentive eligibility and definitions. And last iteration of this program, if you participated, it was based on the region in which that your customer resided. If they were living in an investor-owned utility region that was providing a gas commodity, these are the customers that would have qualified on the program. But this iteration of the program, all existing residential buildings qualify. New construction jobs are ones that will not qualify for tech incentives, and your customer that will qualify lives anywhere in California. So it doesn't matter what region they are living in or who who their utility provider is. If they're a resident of California that lives in an existing residential building, they're meeting qualification criteria. So building type definition. So single family versus a multifamily, a single family home and installations at single individually metered units served within a larger complex, we would consider those single family homes. So one of the basic keys for this indicator is that it's individually metered. And then for multifamily projects, right, that would be property with 5 or more dwelling units where multiple replacements are occurring at once, and installation at buildings with 4 or fewer dwelling units served by a central system would be qualified as a multifamily home. So campuses with multiple individual single family homes, all operated by a single entity, would also be considered multifamily. So when we get into the installation eligibility, the heat pump appliance must be replacing an existing non-heat pump heat source. So that's the key here. So if you have a question about, you know, the existing heat source, if it's propane, yes, it qualifies. If your customer's primary heat source is a wood burning fireplace or pellet stove, and they want to get heat pump equipment, yes, they can be incentivized for that. So the key here is, as long as it's not existing heat pump, you know, being incentivized to go to heat pump. So non-heat pump can be propane, natural gas, wood burning, electric resistance, or solar heated appliances. Heat pump to heat pump plus heat pump added to previously non-conditioned spaces don't qualify. So if you have a man cave or a she shed and it's never been conditioned before, they would not qualify. Dual systems are allowed in the program. However, to qualify, the system must meet a 3-component AHRA, be a AHRA tested system. So that air handler, that coil, and that compressor, as long as these 3 match up on the AHRA database, they would be allowed. So for program rules on how to reserve funds. So this is the important information you're going to want to note, is that how is it that you can reserve funds for your customer confidently? And that the new rule is a contract is required and must be uploaded to reserve funds. So part of that means reserve funds is reservations are eligible for any project with a signed customer contract on or after April 25th is when that program relaunch date was, so that anything from that day forward could qualify for this program. So to be able to reserve these funds, the information we require is just the customer's name, their address, right? A customer signature on that contract with the date of April 25th going forward. And then you input that date into the portal as well, saying this is the contract date, and that matches that contract that was signed of at least April 25th going forward. So more information about how to create a reservation is going to be further along in the presentation, with some slides that have some screenshots to show you what it is that you'd be looking for. So for the program rule, this is the same as the last iteration of the program. For incentive pass down. So incentive is to be passed down 100% from the contractor to the consumer. Incentive can either be passed along as an instant discount or provided after the contractor receives that incentive. So at any rate, the incentive needs to be listed as a line item on your invoice, but it's between you and your customer of how you want that incentive to be passed down. Some contractors will give it immediate incentive to that customer, so they don't pay that dollar amount on the invoice. Or if you prefer, you know, it's still listed on the invoice. The customer's expectation is that when you get that incentive check, you will pass it along to them. So upfront, that customer would pay that total amount for that job to be completed, with the intention of giving that customer their incentive check when you receive it. So in either case, the incentive must be listed as a line item on the invoice and paid to the contractor. Application will ask which method is being used when you're inputting this information into the portal. Was it an instant rebate or was it a delayed passed along incentive to that customer? So the invoice requirements. So an invoice must include the customer's site information and install equipment details along with the incentive amount on that invoice. Paid invoice submitted on the claim must be the same invoice provided to your customer. And this is important information when they do, you know, kind of surveys or any kind of spot checks with customers to ensure, you know, quality assurance on the program. You know, they might ask the customer for a copy of that invoice, and this customer must have the same exact invoice that you're submitting to the program. So the program rule regarding permits, all jobs must be permitted. However, the application only asks for a permit number, and the permit does not need to be closed at the time your application is being submitted. So the only thing that this program is requiring is that you do open up that permit, you enter that permit number into the claim when you're submitting. And submitted permits will be spot checked against the submitted CF3R documentation or with any local jurisdiction to confirm that this permit number is actual, is valid, and it's not just random numbers being inputted into the application. So the program rule regarding incentive capped at cost. So in all cases, the available incentive is capped at the total measure cost, including parts and labor. So what that means is whatever that incentive dollar amount cannot exceed what the total cost is for the job, for the labor, for the parts, the materials, and everything of such. So the application asks for measure cost. Please provide only the cost associated with the individual appliance installation versus the total project cost. So that, for example, on the screen, we have a screenshot that says heat pump water heater install cost. So all costs associated with the heat pump water heater installation only, such as materials, labor, permitting, and all other related material costs would be input there. So that brings us over to single family HVAC to give you an overview of the essential information for the program. Excuse me. So this time around in the program, the incentive structure is flat. It's one rate available throughout the state. If you participate in the last iteration of the program, you'll know based on what region that you're in, if there was a layerable program or what the investor-owned utility was in the area, it could vary on what the incentive that was available. We've streamlined this process and did away with that. And that the incentive rate, incentive amount is $1,000 per unit, which a unit equals a condenser, with a maximum incentive amount for the home of 2 units. So 2 incentives, so it'd be $2,000. So $1,000 incentive available per unit, and a unit is a condenser with a max incentive amount of $2,000. So the program eligibility requirements as it pertains to equipment. It's Title 24 code minimum for heat pumps, and it must be in the AHRI database or have its efficiencies and efficiencies available at the AHRI conditions. So when you purchase equipment from your distributor, this is a document in which that they can provide with you. We have in our database in Iris, where you input information about the equipment, and it will populate in the database if that equipment qualifies. So the next question that we get is SEER. What are the SEER requirements versus SEER 1 versus SEER 2? Both of them qualify. If you can still purchase equipment that's rated with SEER 1 and it's code minimum, it qualifies for this program. And then, as mentioned earlier, regarding dual fuel, eligible if it's part of a 3-component matchup in the AHRI system, with a heat pump program to be the primary heat source, and then the secondary being the other heat source, whether it's natural gas. So eligible previous furnace types, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, as long as your customer didn't have existing heat pump going to another heat pump, effectively it'll qualify. So natural gas, propane, wood, electric resistance. Some things that aren't eligible as a previous heating type would be if there was no heating existing to begin with, right? Like if your customer didn't have air conditioning, that's okay, as long as they had a previous existing heat source that they used. Or no space heaters would qualify for this program too. So no plug-in loads for this program would be considered an existing heat source. So getting into the submittal process, right, for how to submit your claim in the Iris portal, we'll talk about that a little. And these are some of the steps in which that we'll go through. The first step that we'll go through is how to create a reservation, right? So we talked about this a little bit earlier with some of the required information. So incentives are only guaranteed for jobs once a reservation is created and while budgets still remain. So another key indicating information to note this iteration of the program is that once you create a reservation, you have 90 days from that time to move forward with submitting that claim. So reservations are good for 90 days from when it's created, not the date that the contract was signed. And after 90 days, that reservation will be canceled and those funds will be re-released into the program. The reason in which that we're doing this is that there's been instances where you started a claim and for whatever reason, the customer fell off or wasn't interested anymore. That claim still existed, right? We want to be able to be sure that if they're not going to utilize those funds, we want to be able to put those funds back into the unreserved budget so that other contractors can be able to utilize that. Additional time can be granted if needed, right? If you have a situation where you can't get equipment, or you are waiting for a CF3R and the customer's house isn't prepared to go under those kind of testing conditions, reach out to us and let us know, and we can note that account and we can start that timer back on your account. And if there are 2 units being installed and they're different models, you would have to create 2 different reservations. A little bit more information as we get along into the slides, but as mentioned earlier, you would start your incentive process at the catecincentives.com website, otherwise known as the IRIS portal, IRIS like the iris of your eye. You'd fill in your customer's name, their address. You would upload the signed contract with a date matching the date that you're inputting into the portal. And then that's it. When you click save, we'll go into this a little bit later, what that looks like. That effectively will generate a claim number for you, and your funds are now reserved with that 90-day clock starting. So as mentioned earlier, you would go into the CA Tech Incentives website in the IRIS portal, and you would start your process there. For participating contractors, you will already have a login. If you don't have a login and you are a participating contractor, there's going to be information at the end of this to see who you can reach out to get some more information. And again, these slides will be sent out to everybody that's participating in this webinar. So you would click Submit New Claim portion on your IRIS login. That next page that will pop up, you want to be sure that you're selecting the correct tech program. And since the only one that's going on right now primarily is the Tech Clean California Heat Pump HVAC program, you want to make sure that program is selected. Fill in the customer's address, and then on the next portion, you would then fill in the customer's name. If you have their email address and their phone number, you would add the signed customer contract into the dropdown, right? A copy of that, and then you would input in the date that aligns with that contract of what that date was. Again, April 25th going forward. We're not retroactively allowing any jobs to qualify for incentives on the program. And then once you complete that portion, right, you would go all the way to the bottom of that and click Save to Draft. So after saving, you can notice and take note of that claim ID that's being provided, right? And then this will make it much easier to locate the claim when you're prepared to input the rest of the information needed to submit your claim. So the next step on that process would be that you would install the system, right? So some key things that will be helpful and what to keep in mind is review the required claim fields ahead of time before installing to make sure that you note all the information that's required for your claim. So this gives the office manager or whoever submitting claims the opportunity to review some of this information, right? We can even have a checklist of info that an installer would need to be sure that they're capturing out in the field, including photos of, say, nameplates and such, photos of what the existing equipment was prior to intervention. Yeah, and you would snap a picture of pre-existing equipment, preferably a wide angle photo showing the area around it, or adding a time and date stamp will be incredibly helpful to our processors. And then all tech incentive jobs, again, must be permitted. And to reaffirm, permits aren't required to be finalized prior to submitting your claim, but we at least do need that permit opened up and that permit number inputted into the application. So CF3Rs will only be required if the job scope requires it. So for example, if the job won't require a CF3R for instances that could be related to existing asbestos, or no new ducts are being installed, or perhaps it's a ductless system, right? In these cases, if these cases occur, please leave note inside the claim to let the processor know why there isn't a CF3R uploaded with your claim. So if it is exempt from these situations because of these circumstances, please take a photo of the installed condenser and air handler nameplate clearly, showing the manufacturer's model and serial number. So that would be required instead. So instances where a CF3R isn't applicable from your HERS rating, please be sure to attach a photo of the nameplate clearly showing the manufacturer, model, and serial number. And then also Iris functions incredibly well on a phone or tablet. So if your install crews have a phone or tablet that's able to take photos, they can actually log into Iris. They can start the claim there and start inputting all this information out in the field that can help expedite this process. So the next step of the process would obviously be to submit the application. So you've already created your reservation, you've already installed your system. Now you have the rest of the information that's necessary to submit your claim. This is what we would do. So to submit the application, log into the Iris portal, navigate back to your reservation, or you can use the claim number on which that you captured early on, or you can use the address function. But essentially, if you were to go onto your claims, you can click that and list out all the claims that are open for your job and what status that claim is in. So you can either search by that claim number, or you can type in the address function. But be sure that if you originally created your claim with Ave versus Avenue, that you're using the correct spelling, or ST for street, or you wrote out the word street, then that would be helpful, right? So Iris is constantly under development and improvement. For this address search functionality is currently being in the works to make it a little bit more intuitive. So then the next step would be on submitting your application, that if anything is marked with an asterisk or a star next to it, these are required fields. So you might have an instance in which that you've put in all the information and you're trying to hit the submit button, but it's grayed out for whatever reason. It's somewhere in your application there was a required field that didn't get an input of information, and that's preventing that from being able to be submitted. So some of the fields are multi-option pick lists. You can select multiple options, such as the example that's being used on the screen is other major building or infrastructure upgrades, to populate that with different options that you can select. So next is adding the equipment, which is the important part, right? So adding equipment essentially means, or adding material rather, essentially means this is the equipment that you installed. So you would click add material, and then you would input information about the system that you're installing. So only one AHRI pair per claim is supported. So if your job required 2 different AHRI listed systems, you would need to create another application. And when you've clicked on add material, the next section will let you do so. And here you'll use a material lookup helper to start that process. And then when you enter quantity, means how many condensers you're installing. So if you're installing multiple with one serial number, you would input that information here and input the serial number or numbers of the installed condenser or condensers. So this part of the website is pretty intuitive. It's constantly being updated when new equipment is available to ensure that the equipment is listed here. For whatever reason, if you have equipment that does qualify for this program and does have an AHRI certificate and you're not finding it here, please feel free to reach out. Again, at the end of this presentation, we'll have some information about contact info for who you can reach out to, and then relay that information to us. So then the next step in that process will be once you hit submit, on your claim, you'll see flags, and these different flags mean different things, right? Below is going to be the list of the different flags. So we have the blue arrow, right? And this flag typically is automatically added to claims and note information that processors need to be aware of. The one flag that you would need to be aware of would only be this yellow triangle, and that yellow triangle is automatically added by processors. This is the flag that you need to pay attention for. This effectively means that there's some action that is required on your end, whether a photo that you submitted isn't clear enough for a processor and they can't discern the information, or a document is missing. So participants with this type added to their claims will be notified once a week until that issue is resolved. So this iteration versus last iteration of tech, we're aiming to compile a list of, if you have 10 claims and 6 of them have flags, once a week, you'll receive an email to say, hey, these are the claims that need your attention. Other than that, if you log into your claim and you see something other than a yellow triangle, that information is probably not for you. There's no actionable item that's on your end that we're waiting for. So another flag you might see is a red X mark, which that flag typically means there's a major issue preventing the claim to be approved. This is most often associated with bugs. Another flag you might see is a green check mark, which indicates that if there was an issue, that the processor has cleared that issue and it's not an issue anymore. So going more into the common flags, here's some of the definitions and descriptions of these flags. If you see a blue arrow that says processing hold, it's a standard flag that is automatically applied to every single claim. It just essentially means that a processor hasn't had the opportunity to start its first go at reviewing that claim. So another one would be a blue arrow that says duplicate serial number. So something like that is saying that in our system, in our IRIS database, this serial number has been input already, and it might mean something for maybe on your end on data entry, you accidentally input a serial number for the wrong claim, for a claim that you've currently done, where a processor would go in, look at the photos that were submitted of that plate and see if that's the correct serial number. If it's not, and then the processor can fix that, they can move this process along. However, if there is a duplicate of a serial number, as is the photo, the processor might then create that yellow flag for you to go in and to correct that information. Another common flag you'd see is no matching measure, which means that something is broken on the IRIS calculations and that Energy Solutions needs to do a deeper dive, sometimes referred to as a bug. So another flag would be payee participation mismatch. You know, that flag is added to claims submitted by participants who have not signed or the updated TPPA. So they might have participated on the program the first time around, but for some reason that participation agreement didn't get signed or didn't get put into the database. To notify them that, yes, you've signed the new participation agreement, you're 100% okay to submit claims on this program for this go around. Another flag would be quantity review. That would be if more than 2 units submitted on a claim, and you should have created 2 separate claims instead. So the processor will request a participant to change quantity to 2 or less in this circumstance or situation. So that brings us to the important part, right? It's receiving payment on the program. And then how that will go is when you're receiving an incentive payment, all incentive payments are done via physical check, just like it did last iteration of the program. I know we talked about direct deposit. That's something that's still being piloted. There's some issues, but currently that's not available. But if that does become available, we'll absolutely reach out to all our contractors to let them know. And then also checks are sent out every Friday to the address that's submitted during the enrollment. So when you first enrolled for the program, there was a question which asked, what was your shipping address? That's the address that we will be sending checks to. Please reach out if your address changes or if you're not receiving checks, right? Reach out to the list that we're going to show in a few more slides of who your point of contact will be. The check details are also stored in IRIS if you're looking. You can also see the details on which that your checks are being sent. So you can even click on your claim and scroll down and see when a check was being cut and processed. You can see what date that was, and you can see what address that was being sent to. So a little information on that here is to show you that is that if you're looking into your claim, right, the specific claim that you created and everything's been submitted and everything's been approved, you know, this portion of it right here would tell you payment type check. It would show you the date that it was sent out, the incentive dollar amount that was sent out as well. So if you are participating in other programs, like if your service area is the Bay Area or the Central Coast and you participate in either BayREN or the 3CE program, yeah, if you're submitting to one of these programs along with tech, there is no need to submit a second claim for that program, right? So claims within 3CE or BayREN eligible zip codes will automatically be filtered into those programs. But note that the eligibility for these additional incentives is based on customer eligibility. And submitting for one of these programs does not impact the tech incentive total. These additional incentives are purely add-ons. So if you happen to have in your service territory one of these areas and you don't already participate in these programs, I highly suggest reaching out to these programs. It makes the effort a lot easier, considering that if it's one application process and one portal, it's essentially 2 birds with 1 stone. So that brings us to the resources tab, part of the presentation. yeah, this is the information that's important for all of your staff to have access to, whether it's your office staff or if you have, your salespeople out in the field and they want to be confident about the information about the program. These are some of the informations that you're going to want to capture. And again, these slides are going to go out. So with this particular slide, these hyperlinks will be active on the slide. So yeah, the contractor knowledge base is constantly being added to. This is meant to be a one-stop shop when it comes to program related questions, documentation, right? The next resource is going to be the YouTube Tech YouTube channel, which is a great resource to bookmark for instructional, informational videos, such as, how to submit a claim in the IRIS portal. If you have somebody new at your company, this should absolutely be their first resource. I believe there's around 13 videos currently on the YouTube channel, all that have to do with tech and all our new videos. And so the Switches On website is the next web page that I would say is important to have it bookmarked. There you'll find resources to help you not only with this program, but what all available incentives are throughout the state. Based on your zip code that you enter, it can tell you what potential programs are out there. And other than the public reporting site and the budget site, like I mentioned earlier, that you can keep track of what the current amount of funding is left available in this program, another notable resource here is going to be the training hub. And I can't understate this, how significant and how valuable this is. Tech participating contractors are afforded the opportunity to have all this kind of free training that's available to them. We have training from great companies such as Electrify My Home, the National Comfort Institute. All these trainings are free to tech participating contractors. So if you have instances in which that you have people that can't go out into the field, or you want to have somebody brush up on their skills, or they haven't had an opportunity to learn about heat pump technology, these trainings that are constantly happening are great resources. So take advantage of them. Some of them are webinars, some of them are in person. They go throughout different areas and up and down the state. We have some coming up in Santa Rosa. We had one recently in Anaheim. Sacramento has trainings as well. A lot of the times we have them at distributor locations. So it's incredibly helpful, and make this a tab on your web browser that you can check anytime you're looking for it. So that brings us to contact information. So this is essentially going to be the different account managers in your region. The first one listed on the top is myself. My name is Sam Kamsey. I'm the program resource currently for the Bay Area, so all the Bay Area 9 counties, and Orange County as well. Then we have Katie Nash, who represents the greater Los Angeles area, so Ventura County, Los Angeles, and everything up and down the Central Coast. Cassidy Becker is the resource for in the Central Valley area, right from, I believe, above Stockton all the way down Bakersfield, and also the Sacramento Valley, which is, Sacramento County and some neighboring counties. Renee Franco, he is the resource in the San Diego area. So San Diego would be San Bernardino County, Imperial Empire, all that area. And then we call Sierra Desert effectively the desert part of California, and Sierra Nevada. So all up and down the bordering counties between Nevada. And then Margit, he is the resource, anything above Sacramento Valley's area. So anything north, considering Northern California, he would be your main point of contact for the tech program. So all these emails, addresses, again, this whole slide deck will be sent out. So you'll be able to capture that information in case if you're, joining us over the phone and you're not able to see these email addresses, all of these will be available on the website. So another resource is for contacting us. If you're a contractor and you're looking for general contract support, you can email us at tech.contractor@energy-solution.com. And then if you have any questions for your claims or any support that you need about the IRIS portal, that email address to reach out to would be tech.iris@energy-solution.com. And then there's also resources available at energy-solution.com/tech. Again, the switcheson.org would be a fantastic resource. It's where a majority of the information for this program is going to be located. And then we are currently still using Freshdesk for tickets and everything like that. The knowledge base website address that was shared earlier will be another resource that you'll be able to get that link through the switcheson.org for all related program questions and information. So outside of that, this will be the Q&A portion. I'm not sure which questions have already been asked, but I know that the panelists that we have that are helping with this presentation, they can unmute themselves, they can ask a question or read a question out loud, and then answer that question as well. I'm not sure if you guys were okay with that. I can also read. I only see 2 questions that came in through the Q&A portion, but I know there's quite a few questions that have come through the chat. And again, we're going to compile a list of all these questions that are being asked, answer these questions, and have them available when the resource goes out to everybody that's participated on this webinar. So the slide deck, the questions, and then the questions that got answered as well. So one of the questions in the Q&A portion says, instant rebates to customer, does that mean the contractor will get the rebate check? So yeah, this is a contractor-centric program. So all incentive checks will be delivered directly to the contractor, and then it's up to you on how you structure your business model, how that rebate gets applied, right? Every invoice needs to have listed that an incentive is being offered to the customer. It's up to you if you want to give that rebate instantly to the customer and knock that dollar amount off on your invoice and show it on the invoice, that's totally fine. Or if you prefer that the customer pays the full amount of the install cost with that incentive still listed on the invoice, and pass along that incentive when you receive it, right? So at any rate, when you're doing your application into the IRS portal, it's going to ask you which method was used. Did you instantly give that customer that rebate, or are you passing it along to them when you receive that check? So the next question is will we have resources available that respond? Yeah, I mean, last iteration of the program, I came onto this program around late November, early December, right? And I've only heard stories, so many stories from different contractors and different account managers and different participants in this program. As you guys know, these funds were utilized effectively way more rapidly than anticipated. This program that was originally slated to be a 3-year program utilized all funds within 6 months. So you can imagine the influx of contractor interest. Last iteration, we had over 1,000 contractors that participated on the program. So our commitment to you is within 2 days, we'll be getting back to you. And if that doesn't happen within 2 days, feel free to reach out to me directly, and we'll make that right. Does the original heat source need to be removed? Right, so that's one of the, I believe Cassidy is actually typing out the answer to that question currently. And yeah, I don't want to derail her doing that. Does anybody know if there's questions that were asked in the chat that haven't been answered? Again, we'll be able to send out all the questions that are answered with the answer attached to it to everybody that's joined us for this webinar. If you do have any more questions, you can use the QA function in the little toolbar for Zoom. I know that people are using the chat function, but once a question is answered, we can move along. It helps keep track a little bit easier. I know that we've had, I think, 5 panelists helping us answer questions in the chat. Feel free to scroll through the chat to see some of these questions that are answered and to be able to answer them. Would a project qualify for a rental property I own? I have an HVAC business. Absolutely. This is open to all residents of California if it's an existing property, right? It's not a new building. It's an existing residential home, even if it's yours, right? The objective of this program is not only to educate and train and inform the public, but it's to electrify California, to get away from some of these fossil fuels, which is why propane is a existing qualifying piece of equipment. Or even, like I mentioned earlier, if your customer's primary heat source is wood burning, right? If they burn wood, pellet stove, there's an incentive available to help them move over to heat pump technology. So I see a majority of the questions have been answered. The reason why I was able to get to that was one of the more recent ones. But yeah, again, if you have a question, please feel free to use the QA function as well. I think the majority of these questions have been asked in the chat function. We've had one of the panelists jump in and provide an answer. So yeah, I can't reaffirm this enough. If you haven't had an opportunity to take advantage of some of the trainings that we have, you should absolutely do so. There's one called ESMAC, which is the Energy Star Manufacturers Action Council. So it's effectively all these different manufacturers that come together put together what they feel is important in these trainings, and they have them generally every other Monday from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. And it's actually one of the prerequisites for when the heat pump water heater program relaunches in August or September. Another part of this program that we have available for those that don't know is since C20 contractors are able to install heat pump water heaters, so that's if you're an HVAC contractor, CSLB has said that it is okay for you with your license to install a heat pump water heater, that this program we have carve out for is that we are offering the opportunity for a contractor to get a heat pump water heater up to 6 per their office on the program, right? So you would pick it up at your distributor once you complete the prerequisites. You would install it at your own home or your own business. It gives you the opportunity to have this equipment in your home, right? For you to be able to speak confidently about your experience when customers ask you about heat pump water heater. We know that this is typically one of those things that aren't proactively switched out, right? Like if your heat pump water heater goes out, if water is spraying or any of these circumstances, generally the customer is going to want that replaced like for like as soon as they can, right? So something like this, while you're already in the customer's home, especially if your customer has solar already, right? Like this heat pump HVAC system is effectively going to help condition their home with, you know, the energy that they're already generating. You know, while you're having these conversations, you can absolutely, you know, bring up heat pump water heater. The available incentives for that program when it rolls out is pretty much going to look like what it looked like in the first iteration, with, you know, incentives starting at around $3,100, upwards of $7,000. You know, there's going to be incentives available for panel upgrades if that's something that your customer requires. So we want to hit the ground running on that, and the way we do that is, you know, take these trainings that are available, have these conversations. You want it to be on the forefront so you confidently can speak to your customers, and even more so with your own personal experience. So if you have a heat pump water heater issued to you, and like I said, up to 6 for your business, you can even have one installed at your place of business. You can use that equipment as a training tool, and then, you know, share your experience of what that's like with your customers. So one of the prerequisites, like I said, for that part of the program is going to be that ESMAC training, Energy Star Manufacturers Action Council. It's a webinar, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. The next one that's coming up is on May 8th. So I encourage you to visit the switcheson.org website, where you can find training information. Like I said, that particular training is a webinar. Fantastic, great start into ramping up into electrifying California. I see that there's continue to be questions being asked and answered, and thank you, Margit, for posting that link for that ESMAC training. Margit is also, like I said, the account manager for Northern California, so anything above Sacramento County, he would be your point of contact. So I see there's still questions being asked and answered. Again, if you have a question, feel free to put it in the Q&A portion of the toolbar for Zoom, and then I can read that question out live. For the ones that have been asked throughout the whole entire webinar, I see that all of our panels have been able to answer some of these questions. So yeah, so along with the ESMAC training, which the link is posted in the chat for you to register for the next one that's coming up on May 8th. You know, there's other trainings that are available. We have the Association for Energy Affordability that has an online learning system that you can take all the classes, all the recordings that are being provided there. There's also a link right there, thank you, Margit, in the chat, for where you can find all the different training dates that are coming up. There's an Electrify My Home training coming up this month, another fantastic organization, especially for contractors that aren't too familiar with electrification, right? Like there's some circumstances where, you know, a customer feels like they might not be able to electrify because their panel is already full. But without knowing about, you know, different kind of opportunities and situations where you can double up or quad up some of these breakers in the panel, and what they effectively call a watt diet. You know, they've been able to work with 100 amp panel service, move things around, and especially if a customer has an electric car, right? They share the same circuit as something like a clothes dryer, right? Or a stove. You're typically charging your car at night, so why not be able to share that same breaker space for something else that you're not using at night, such as your stove or your dryer. So yeah, they're training. I mean, this company's been electrifying homes for over 20 years. They are effectively wanting to train their competitors to be better. So that's how committed they are to electrification. So a question that came in said, so a boiler doing radiant heat can stay if I'm installing mini splits, or a wood stove can stay if I'm installing mini splits. So your primary heat source, let me see if I can actually allow Esther to be able to more eloquently shorthanded answer this question about leaving an existing heat source at the home without having to abandon it. And Esther, also, if you want to unmute yourself, you can. Oh, she says she's having issues unmuting. Let me see if I can help you out there. I'm pressing a button that says ask to unmute. I'm not sure if you're seeing anything on your end. Oh, I think it's her microphone.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, could you redirect me to that question again? Is it
Sure.
this?
So the question was about existing heat sources, right? So if they have a boiler doing radiant heat, that can stay if they're installing a mini split, or a wood stove can stay if they install a mini split. So they're basically asking if the existing heat source, right, is that able to stay when they're installing a heat pump?
Right, so I'm going to kind of take apart that question. So the wood stove, we can only replace the wood stove if it is used as the primary source of heating. So you can install the mini split to replace that primary source of heating. And then the boiler doing radiant heat, I want to say that actually might not be qualified, but let me take that question back to our engineer.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I've seen instances in which that a customer would use a wood stove as their primary heat source. If that is their primary heat source, then yes, it would qualify for incentive for a mini split to be installed. And if it's still functioning as a wood stove, that would be able to stay, as it's not going to be continued to be used as their heating appliance. So I see that there's a couple more questions still coming in that haven't got answered yet. So the two systems installed in the same house going on one submission. And thank you, Katie, for answering the chat. Yes, if it's the same system, that can be on the same claim. But if these are two different systems, right, it would have to have two different claims created for that instance. But yes, if they're the same brand and same model, you can put them on the same application. But if they're different, they would need two different claims. So again, if you have the opportunity, please, some of the links that were placed in the chat, save those into a folder, into your browser. And then also Katie linked an article about, two systems on one address, and if that needs to go on two claims or onto one claim. But yeah, let's save these links in your chat. Again, we'll be sending out these slides to the people that were joining us over the phone and didn't have that opportunity to see the screen or take a screenshot or know what it is that I'm referring to in the chat where these links are present. But please take advantage of the opportunities that you have with these free trainings for tech participating contractors. Some of them, are upwards of $700-800 typically for any other contractor that just wants to take this training. But part of tech's mission, and not only just electrification and carbon reduction, is education in the workforce. So specifically, some of these funds are sent out to these companies that support this program and offer trainings to contractors. So again, we're going to be able to send out these slide decks. We're going to send out a list of the different questions that were asked. We're going to compile them from the first webinar that we had on the 27th that just passed, and then today, and we'll be sending out links to everybody that joined us on this webinar. So if there's no more leading questions, I want to be able to end this a little bit early, earlier than expected. Again, if you have questions, let me put back on the screen the different lists of account managers. If you want that information right now, you can screenshot or take a photo with your phone so you can send emails out and ask your questions immediately if you don't want to wait for us to be able to send that slide deck out. Please feel free to do so. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. Again, this iteration of the program is great. We are going to be starting up the heat pump water heater portion of the tech program around August, September. So be on the lookout for that. Trainings that are happening coming up, take advantage of those. The couple that are referenced are the ones that are going to be webinars. Every other Monday, the ESMAC training takes place 7 a.m. To 9 a.m. And I want to be able to, excuse me, give Esther an opportunity to update Alex on his question.
Thank you. If the boiler or gas product remains in, then it's considered under the dual fuel rule and can only remain if it is part of the AHRI matched pair. Wood stove is less important whether it remains in or has to be removed, because that could be more difficult from an infrastructure standpoint.
So there it is. So yeah, if you want to go the dual fuel route, it would have to be matched up part of that 3-part match in the AHRI database. So that's going to be your air handler, right, and your condenser and your compressor. So the coil, the air handler, and compressor would need to match up, in the AHRI database for that to be able to be okay to leave as an existing appliance. If nobody else has any more questions at all, I thank you for joining us. Again, if you have any questions, our contact information is on the screen. Again, my name is Sam Kamsey. I am the account manager for the Bay Area region and Orange County as well. I'll talk to you guys soon. Have a great day. Thank you.